Today, we are not listening to the victors or the historians. We are listening to a survivor, to a voice the wind tried to carry away. This is the testimony of Pretty Shield, a Crow woman who lived it, whose husband scouted for Custer, whose family fought in the battle, and whose truth has waited over a century to be heard. Born in approximately 1856, Pretty Shield was a figure of remarkable fortitude and perception. She was the wife of Goes Ahead, a loyal Crow scout who worked with the U.S. military, famously for the officer George Armstrong Custer. Significantly, she was also the niece of Half Yellowface, a distinguished Crow chief who led the scouts assigned to Custer's 7th Cavalry. Celebrated for her keen mind, profound wisdom, and resolute courage, Pretty Shield's grasp of her culture's traditions is a treasure. Her personal memories of the Battle of Little Bighorn, a conflict in 1876 where her husband stood with Custer, testify to her unconquerable heart. Her narratives and understanding have carved a permanent place in the historical record, a heritage that continues to captivate researchers and authors in the modern day. However, before we continue, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. I believe Goes Ahead was alongside General Custer during that fateful day at Little Bighorn, I inquired. A look of deep pride illuminated Pretty Shield's face as she answered, "Yes, and in honor of his service, the Great Father in Washington sends me a document with every new moon, which I exchange for $30, funds I use for my grandchildren, though I would not turn away additional support." When I encouraged her to recount her experiences, she stood and moved to the doorway, gazing toward the slopes scattered with pale markers, showing where, on that 25th of June in 1876, Custer and his valiant 7th Cavalry perished. "Were the soldiers laid to rest?" I asked, joining her at the threshold. Her reply was measured. "I cannot say, Sign Talker, but I recall the smell of death hung in the air the whole season, forcing us to depart. It became unbearable." With a profound breath, she came back inside, whispering, "War is a blight, for it forever creates hollow places where kin once stood." Continuing her account, she said plainly, "I was but a girl when Son of the Morning Star, General Custer, clashed with our longtime foes, the Lakota and Cheyenne, at Little Bighorn. Many of our men scouted for the other leader, General Terry, while more than 150 others rode with 3 stars, General Crook, who was defeated by Crazy Horse at the Rosebud. Yet others served alongside Son of the Morning Star, and it is their history you wish me to share. I will start from the first moment. Our people were settled above the confluence of the Rotten Sundance Teepee, Clark Fork, when soldiers in blue uniforms arrived, seeking our chief's aid in locating enemy scouts. They had traveled across the Elk River, the Yellowstone, on a steamboat, coming when the foliage was still new and lush. Our leader received them with a generous meal, and the warriors convened in council, though being a woman, I had no place in their discussions. Nevertheless, 25 of our younger men agreed to join the soldiers at the mouth of the Tongue River. My uncle, Half Yellowface, commanded them. During their second night's encampment near the place now called Forsyth, the Lakota took every single horse belonging to our Crow Scouts. Stranded without mounts, our men were still unfamiliar with the white soldiers' methods of warfare. My husband Goes Ahead was one of them. The recollection brought a faint smile to her face. "Ah, the Lakota were cunning thieves of horses," she acknowledged. "Indeed, they could take horses as expertly as any Crow. We ourselves often possessed many Lakota ponies. On occasion, hundreds," she chuckled. Then gathering her thoughts, she continued, "It fell to someone to ride back to our camp for new horses, because without them, the Crow Scouts could not proceed any farther. 2 riders departed to secure new mounts, and a dozen additional young warriors accompanied them to reach the stranded party, who remained on foot. Lacking an interpreter of their own, the Crow Scouts had to rely on a man of mixed Lakota heritage to translate once they arrived at the Bluecoats encampment by the Tongue River. During this time, our village, a vast gathering of teepees and horses, relocated to Long Drop. A Shoshone warrior came to us, calling for more Crow men to rally with 3 stars, General Crook, at Goose Creek, near the place known today as Sheridan, Wyoming. He declared that their combined strength would overwhelm the Lakota and Cheyenne. Yet in the end, 3 stars was overpowered. The Crow and Shoshone fighters who stood with him also tasted defeat. I have no doubt they battled with courage, even though the Blue soldiers had selected an unfavorable field of combat against Crazy Horse on the Rosebud. More than 100 of our youths, maybe as many as 150, answered the call and served alongside the Shoshone scouts gathered by 3 stars. Plenty Coos, a rising leader, carried their sacred pipe. Other respected figures like Flathead Woman, Medicine Crow, and Alligator Stands Up rode with them. I can't describe the battle in detail, but I remember Bull Snake returning badly wounded and the many bluecoats left dead. We moved our village to Yellow Willows to stay clear of the fighting. With so few warriors remaining, the camp stayed quiet until the men came back. When they finally arrived, the village burst into life. The women rushed to their husbands and brothers, asking after their safety. Pretty Shield paused, her eyes bright with mischief. Leaning closer, she whispered, "Did the men ever tell you about the woman who fought with 3 stars on the Rosebud?" "No," I admitted, intrigued. Pretty Shield gave a gentle laugh. "Ah, they prefer not to discuss it." A knowing smile touched her lips. "Yet I will share it with you. We Crow understand this tale intimately. I do not repeat another's account, only what is true. Yes, a Crow individual fought alongside 3 stars at the Rosebud. To be precise, one of them transcended every category. Not entirely a man, nor a woman. She clothed herself as a fighter, yet carried a woman's essence. Her name was Finds Them and Kills Them." Pretty Shield's voice fell to a whisper, her eyes shining. She did not possess a man's physical power, but held a woman's deep understanding. The other one, the wild magpie, was completely unrestrained, tied to no spouse, daring without fear, and as strikingly beautiful as the heavens at night. Her focus turned inward. "I know few details of the Rosebud battle except what my husband, Goes Ahead, later shared. When the men came back, the air was thick with their songs of triumph. I watched the 2 of them, Finds Them and Kills Them, and the untamed magpie, riding and chanting with the warriors. The first held a gun. The second swung a coup stick adorned with just 1 eagle feather. Each performed deeds of great valor. After Bull Snake was struck and fell, Finds Them and Kills Them rushed to cover him, shooting relentlessly at the Lakota. The wild magpie rode around them, her battle scream cutting through the tumult as she raised her coup stick. When Lakota fighters pressed forward to take Bull Snake's scalp, her spiritual power was so strong it forced them to retreat. Bull Snake survived, and every warrior witnessed it. Still, they have never uttered a single word about it. The arrival of the Crow scouts and the 2 individuals back at our camp is a vision I will never forget. Her animated expression softened a little. I felt great pride in their courage, even the untamed ones. They were tending to Bull Snake as they came in. Oh, the rejoicing was intense. We staged a grand scalp dance with 10 tokens taken, though the free magpie surrendered hers to the warriors. Our camp, which had been quiet, now erupted in feasting and dancing, the drums throbbing like a steady pulse. Our moods were lifted, light as floating down. The women who had been anxious with so many men absent now laughed freely where before we had been quiet. But my own husband Goes Ahead remained elsewhere, scouting with Son of the Morning Star and the other army leaders at the mouth of the Tongue River. My heart longed for his homecoming. In that time, it was always the women who waited, praying their men would return from battle. Whether the fight was with the Lakota, the Pecuni, the Arapaho, or the Cheyenne. Yet even amidst the worry, there was still happiness. Now, having recounted our people's movements, I come to the tale you requested, the conflict on the Little Bighorn. After Son of the Morning Star departed the soldiers' camp on the Tongue River, he traveled up the Rosebud. My husband Goes Ahead and 6 other men, White Swan, Half Yellowface, Hairy Moccasin, White Man Runs Him, and Curly, served as his scouts. The country was swarming with Lakota and Cheyenne, as numerous as insects on a new kill. Our Crow scouts found evidence all around. Hoof prints, abandoned fire rings, partially consumed remains, all showing the foe had moved through in great hurry. Such markers tell a deep story. They show warriors traveling quickly toward a place not yet known. My husband Goes Ahead, together with White Man Runs Him and Hairy Moccasin, ranged out in front of Son of the Morning Star and his uniformed cavalry. My uncle, half yellow face, who bore the holy pipe, guided them, while Curly kept his position near Son of the Morning Star personally. Curly pleaded illness, and perhaps he was truly unwell. The burden of what was coming could make any man crave respite. Perhaps the vision of the future he perceived was sufficient to make him feel sick. It would cause anyone to desire a moment to rest. "Are you familiar with where Busby is?" she inquired abruptly. "I am," I replied. "Well, Busby did not exist in that time," she stated with a thin laugh. "The 3 Crow scouts, riding in advance of Son of the Morning Star, discovered signs of an enormous Lakota encampment. Embers still holding heat, a handful of loose horses, they claimed. This was the identical village that had defeated 3 Stars, though no one yet understood that Crazy Horse had already been victorious at the Rosebud. My husband goes ahead, together with Harry Moccasin and White Man Runs Him, observed more Lakota and Cheyenne fighters ahead than there were cartridges in the soldiers' pouches. They decided it was prudent to alert Son of the Morning Star, so they turned back and informed him. But he merely said, 'Continue to scout ahead,' and took a swallow from that canteen wrapped in straw on his saddle, as though their caution carried no weight. So goes ahead, and the 2 other Crow scouts did as ordered. Yet when they arrived at the spot where the vast Lakota camp had been, they paused for Son of the Morning Star and his troopers. They had the sense not to proceed alone any further. The Lakota and Cheyenne forces surpassed them beyond measure. When Son of the Morning Star caught up, he inquired about a more suitable place to make camp, and goes ahead proposed the stream the white men named Thompson, known for its cool, fresh springs. The soldiers settled there for the night. Well before dawn the following day, the Crow scouts set out once more. By the middle of the day, they witnessed it, the largest gathering any of them had ever seen, spread out along the Little Bighorn. The valley was dense with lodges, and the slopes were covered with Lakota and Cheyenne ponies, more than could ever be counted. Goes Ahead later confessed the vision filled him with terror. He, along with Harry Moccasin and White Man Runs Him, fell back along the stream the whites call Reno, where they encountered Son of the Morning Star advancing down. Once more they cautioned him. The enemy warriors were too numerous, far beyond what the soldiers could ever engage. Once more he paid them no heed. But Son of the Morning Star, like a down feather swept by the breeze, was destined for his end, unable to see the peril. She clenched a hand against her brow, shaking her head slowly. "He refused to hear," she whispered, "and he was courageous. Yes, a man of great courage." 2 bodies, the interpreter of mixed blood, paid close attention, she continued. He pleaded with Son of the Morning Star, "You can still retreat without harm." Yet the soldier chief was determined to fight, drawn toward his death by some invisible force, and so he guided his men to perish alongside him. Goes Ahead recounted to me that Son of the Morning Star drank too much from that canteen wrapped in straw. And when 2 bodies cautioned him, he committed his fatal error, dividing his command into 3 parts, dispatching 2 groups away from his own. Pretty Shield's tone grew more intense as she continued. She rose, bracing her hands on the table. That was the moment Goes Ahead prepared himself for battle, fastening breath feathers into his hair. The lesser chief, Reno, rode off as commanded, taking the Arikara scouts, White Swan, and Half Yellow Face, who ought not to have gone. Curly, still professing sickness, ran away. "I know this is true," she stated with conviction, "because Goes Ahead witnessed it himself." Reno crossed the stream, discharged a few rounds, then pulled back. He understood how the clash would conclude. Anyone watching could have foreseen the result. Goes Ahead rode next to Son of the Morning Star as they approached the churning flow of the Little Bighorn. He heard a Lakota fighter call out to 2 bodies, "Go back now, or you will be killed today." Still, Son of the Morning Star advanced, moving into the river with 2 bodies and the flag carrier. There, in that murky water, all 3 were slain. When their commander went down, the remaining troopers clambered up the steep banks in a panicked withdrawal. Goes Ahead, White Man Runs Him, and Harry Moccasin saw the futility of their situation and made their escape. Afterwards, my husband pointed out to me the precise spot where Son of the Morning Star died. I could lead you to it myself. They got away by following a small tributary that runs into the Little Bighorn, just upstream from where the general fell. Their retreat concluded when they arrived at the pack train, where the men had circled their wagons into a defensive position. With bullets singing past and pack mules dropping nearby, they scraped out shallow rifle pits, using the fallen animals for extra shelter. Goes Ahead always swore they took more Lakota, and Cheyenne lives from that place than the soldiers did anywhere else. Her voice gained force as she went on, then unexpectedly grew quiet. Ah, she let out a long breath. My Goes Ahead confessed his terror that day, but he did not flee until he watched Son of the Morning Star sink into the river. He showed me every detail, where the general was killed, where he started his getaway, where he made his stand with the Packers. Her hand followed the rim of the table. That stone marker the white men erected? It is not correct. He perished in the water. She uttered this final piece gently, as though confiding a truth to Goes Ahead's ghost. Our translator, Goes Together, put down her beadwork, clearly touched by the elder's story. When Pretty Shield began speaking again, her manner took me by surprise. The shooting and battle shouts ceased as the sun began its descent toward the west, she stated plainly. White man runs him persuaded the rest to depart before the Lakota overran their place. The 3 Crow scouts, now carrying army rifles, made ready to steal away. Their ruse proceeded without a hitch when the lead packer challenged them. Where are you headed? He demanded. White man runs him, always clever with words, answered that they required water. The packer gave them canteens, even though every soldier who had attempted to get water had been slain. The Crows never planned to fill them. Moving up along Reno Creek, they came to the timber where 4 Lakota scouts, watchers not fighters, observed from afar. One trailed behind on a gray horse, pulling a sorrel mule. Goes Ahead took his scalp and secured the horse for White Man runs him. The ancient gray mare, her spine aching from long service, became their communal ride after their own horses were gone. I recall that tired Lakota pony clearly, Pretty Shield reflected. The mule broke free when its tether snagged, but that persistent gray horse could not get away. This took place in that season when the leaves are fully grown. Upon arriving at the swollen Bighorn near where Hardin stands today, a steady rain was falling in the gray evening light. Wearing only their battle leggings, they plunged into the water, swimming without sight and mistaking a mid-river island for the opposite bank. There they waited, chilled and famished, their last food consumed before the fighting started. While they recovered their strength, Goes Ahead noticed 2 shapes on a faraway bluff. Crows, he declared, though his companions worried they could be Lakota. The dull day lingered, the river's noise drowning out everything else. Using careful hand signs, Goes Ahead hailed the figures across the turbid flow. The distant forms answered. They were not foes, but Crow scouts. Their sign language brought bleak tidings. Every last blue-uniformed horseman was slain. One scout, No Milk, who had traveled with Gibbon's foot soldiers, forded the stream bringing vital supplies, salt pork, hard bread, and extra army clothes. His caution struck like lightning. Soldiers who walk are coming slowly with their supply wagons, and more grimly, White Swan and Half Yellowface died with Reno's doomed men. Additional Crow scouts, who had been with Terry and Gibbon's marching columns, now left the infantry's sluggish progress behind. When they arrived at our camp on Arrow Creek, fear held sway. In the fading light, our warriors, their nerves worn thin from endless watchfulness, confused them for Lakota attackers. Goes Ahead was forced to kill 2 ponies to prevent a fatal error before it could start. Every dark shape seemed like a Lakota fighter back then, Pretty Shield remembered, her hands quivering a little. Our men were startled by their own breathing. The warriors' return should have sparked celebration, but the deaths of Half Yellowface and White Swan left us empty. The camp broke into mourning. Women slashed their arms, men chanted songs for the dead, all covered in the blood of sacrifice. When my father made ready to grieve for his brother Half Yellowface, Goes Ahead stopped his blade. Wait 4 sons. If he is not back, I will cut my own skin beside you. That night our sorrow rose like campfire smoke. For our dead scouts, for the reckless son of the morning star, for all the blue soldiers who rode to their ends. Her account stopped suddenly, her gaze locked on some unseen place past my shoulder. Sign talker, she said abruptly. That famous war leader's reason was lost to whiskey long before the current claimed his body. I have witnessed what the white man's liquor does. Observed chiefs place their marks on papers they could not understand, while the bottle's ghost murmured to them. A brittle laugh left her. Our old ones did not know liquor's sting until that steamboat blew apart on the Yellowstone and casks washed onto the shore. When our youths tasted it that first time, they staggered like fawns on new legs. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. But today, her tone turned sharp. Today they drink with no pride, without end. Guiding her back, I inquired about the scouts who vanished. Ah, Curly! Her mouth drew tight. That one remained gone long enough for his shadow to be reborn. When he at last came back with Terry's soldiers to that field of skeletons, even then his stories coiled like a serpent. Afterwards, following a trip to the White Father's great lodge, his words never again spoke straight. Then the impossible happened. Half Yellowface and White Swan came back like men returned from the spirit world. Their telling unfolded like a tale of ghosts, how they had mistakenly ridden with Reno into calamity, saw with dread as the frantic officer caught in his own stirrups turned and ran. Seeing inevitable destruction, the two scouts clawed their way to a depression in the hillside. That very refuge Goes Ahead later pointed out to me, and which I could still point out to you now. I remember how they sounded, Pretty Shield murmured, like forefathers talking through the fog, and that gash in the ground where death moved right past them. Her fingers drew an unseen form in the space before her, following the lines of remembrance and deliverance. Fire crept toward the borders of their hiding place as Lakota fighters torched the grassland. White Swan held his injured hand. The harm from the bullet would never completely mend. Another round scraped his shoulder, leaving just a crimson line, while his foot carried its own aching proof of their frantic defense. For 2 full cycles of sun and moon, the scouts crouched in their dirt hollow with Arikara allies, inhaling air heavy with bitter smoke that burned their vision and scorched their throats. The ground itself appeared intent on smothering them. Then, as abruptly as the violence arrived, it departed. The Lakota and Cheyenne war bands moved elsewhere, leaving nothing but the smell of charred earth and spent powder. When Gibbon's walking soldiers at last came into view, half Yellowface almost cried from release. White Swan's injuries were rotting, and their stomachs clawed with emptiness after suns without real sustenance. Pretty Shield stopped, her hands absently brushing the folds of her dress. Even if Son of the Morning Star had never split his soldiers, she considered, he still would have found his death that day. His road was already marked. A quiet moment of reflection passed before she finished. Only if 3 stars, the one who walks with a limp, and Custer had joined all their warriors together, might they have hoped to survive. But facing that many Lakota and Cheyenne, not one war leader alone could have won. The elder fighter's knotted finger drew unseen trails before him as he carried on with his telling. Goes Ahead pointed out all of it to me, the stream where they clawed their way to security, the very ground where they stood with the Packers in their last fight. His eyes, clouded by years but keen with remembrance, held mine. When I was a youth, I knew a Lakota warrior named Big Nose, who vowed he himself had slain Longhair Custer. Claimed the general perished in the river beside that half-blood guide. 2 bodies. The white men named him Mitch Boyer. He offered other pieces of remembrance, largely small points that the years had polished. Yet one disclosure remained distinct. We discovered 4 soldier bodies 6 miles from the battle. One wore an officer's stripes. This unintended support of Pretty Shield's story ran a chill through me, though I had never questioned her words. There exists a certain strength when separate strands of spoken history braid into the same certainty. These echoes from before, Pretty Shield's deliberate telling, the old warriors' supporting facts, even the Lakota foe's proud assertions, all meet like smaller streams flowing into the wide river of what happened. They give us more than mere events from that decisive June day in 1876. They grant something much more precious, the breathing viewpoint of those who were present, whose lives were altered forever by the meeting of worlds on the Little Bighorn. May these personal testimonies enrich your grasp of this crucial chapter in the Great Sioux War, not as distant facts stored in books, but as lived experience carved into remembrance and handed down across lifetimes. For when all is said, every major historical moment is, in truth, a gathering of individual narratives, and these rank among the most significant we possess from that fractured era. This account is a compass, pointing not just to a place in the water, but to a fundamental truth, that beneath the monument and the myth, there is always the memory. And memory has a current all its own. Pretty Shield's story doesn't end with the last gunshot. It flows like that river into the questions we are left with. But what is your view? Was Custer's last stand a disastrous mistake or an unavoidable collision of ways of life? Leave your opinions in the comments. Let's ensure history remains vibrant through discussion. For more hidden stories, click on the like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you're always notified when we explore the past.